Hello, hi. It's a beautiful day. I hope that that is true for you. I'm sure that it's true for you, but I hope that you are embracing that, looking at things from that perspective as much as possible. I know, I don't know what energy you're in right now. I'm getting this feeling of like you coming to YouTube to watch videos to be slightly distracted from whatever it is that's going on. If that is the case, I totally feel it, but I mean, it's good. It's good for a time. Hopefully this can be a blessing to you, but hopefully it can also bring you into a space where you're able to actually manage your things, so that you're not letting anything slip behind. Today has been very particular in reminding me that things are moving extremely quickly in the universe right now. And so if there's something you're feeling led to, it's best to not procrastinate. Meanwhile, I'm doing this, but that's because right now is not the time. I did procrastinate, and then I realized that I needed to charge my phone. So now I'm charging my phone before I go to the library. But I am likely cutting into my time with things at the library. So it is what it is. I will make the most of that. However, earlier today, there was 2 different times today where, actually it was last night and this morning. Last night I'd procrastinated on taking a bath to the point that I wasn't able to take one. Instead, I just took a shower and soaked my feet, just because I procrastinated until it was too late. And then today, I was planning on cooking breakfast. I was actually going to cook myself breakfast before I got started with the day, and procrastinated on that to the point that there just wasn't the time for it. And so, you know, these little things, like, it's about getting on top of these things. If you're in the same energy that I'm in, then, you know, there's likely things that you're kind of letting fall to the wayside, and that's fine, because a lot of those things may be things that are ultimately aren't the best for you. But taking a bath, eating breakfast, that would have been beneficial. I'm not worse off because of it necessarily, just because I'm maintaining myself, but those things would have added to my experience, and my procrastination led to me not being able to add to my experience in those ways. So I think that it can be very helpful just as a reminder to do the things. Don't hesitate to do the things that you feel led to do. Let those things be your guide. Listen to your body, listen to your heart, listen to your mind, listen to, you know, whatever it is that's going on around you, and learn to trust those things. You know, it does take time to kind of cultivate that as a skill, but that way you're not missing out. That way you're paying attention. And the thing about it too is that it's not just about having the skill of being able to not procrastinate. It's that skill, honing in on that skill, will then lead to benefits elsewhere, especially in your spiritual, mental, emotional states. When you learn to trust your intuition about some things, it generally helps to trust your intuition about other things. So it's interesting, but like, you may find yourself at some point in time looking in retrospect and being like, oh, that wasn't a good decision. This thing isn't really actually helpful for me. This isn't the best thing for me. How did I fall into this thing? And if you were to trace it back, you would realize that there were actually multiple experiences that the universe was giving to you prior to that experience to hone in on your intuition, and the deflection of those types of things, or just the lack of discernment to really follow through on those things, then stabilized that lack of discernment to fall into that greater experience. But the universe is always doing smaller things to lead up into these things. So, you know, it's about being in the right heart and mind. And like, I'm supposed to go on a date today, and I'm very excited about it. I probably shouldn't talk too much about it now that I'm thinking about it. But I had been feeling a lot of ways prior to being invited out, and those really led straight into it so that it felt like a pure manifestation. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that I just like manifested this great thing for myself. I still have to keep myself completely. I don't often date, and when I do, it's very important that I like pay attention, that I don't just let myself fall into my emotions, into my affections, into my desires. I have to keep myself very keen, so as to not fall victim to toxic cycles, unhealthy relationships, different types of codependencies, or even into my sex addiction. So, you know, it was like, as much as I did manifest this, or that the universe has allowed it to be manifested through me in certain ways or for me in certain ways, I can't just take everything as an innate positive as much as I would love to. I am trying to work to get to that point, really, truly. But at the same time, I think it's always important to kind of be somewhat keen, especially when dealing with matters of the heart, or matters of, you know, one's personal integrity, or matters of like one's future and the steps one is taking in order to make sure that their future is secure. Right now, there is so much going on in the universe that can lead into distraction, and knowing oneself is ultimately going to be the way that we aren't given to those distractions. However, that's always the hardest thing, right? That's always, especially because no matter how much you know yourself, it can still be easy to fall into old behaviors or ways of thinking, depending on the distractions at hand. So, you know, it's just important to be positive, to be grateful, to look forward into things, to not be afraid of things. I kind of took, like, when I was asked on this date, I kind of wanted to just immediately, because last week I went on a couple dates with the same person and ended up feeling some types of ways. And, you know, I'm not trying to damage myself to the point of being like, I just went through so much shit, so I'm not open anymore. The universe told me to be open, and so I received that. But it was hard for me. It was hard for that, and especially because it was triggering all of these different fears and doubts and just trepidations that I have about interacting with people on an extremely personal level and being vulnerable, you know. I'm given to it in such weird degrees. I am often, to most people, the most vulnerable person that they meet right off the bat. I'm very confident in that way. I'm very capable in that way. However, there then comes a certain point where most people would then be like, oh, so this is when we fall into intimacy and into potential codependency, toxic or otherwise. That's where my blocks come in. And that's when suddenly I'm pulling away, I'm isolating, I'm setting extremely strong standards for independence. And that can be really triggering for a lot of people because that's not the way most people engage. I'm trying to smooth that out a bit so it's not such a stark contrast necessarily, or so that I'm not acting on a constant defense. But I had to learn that over time because I want to remain vulnerable and open and expressive and honest and genuine, but I also don't want to be given to the toxic codependency and control that I've tended to experience in relationships, being so incredibly vulnerable and unintentionally open. You know, so I'm still learning those boundaries. And yeah, right now seems like a particular time as I'm learning those boundaries. Even recently, I've been really focused on how this doesn't just apply to romantic relationships. This applies to friendships. That's been going on for the last few years, especially. It's particularly this year. I've been very guarded against even just friendships that I normally wouldn't be so guarded against. And trying to remain open and vulnerable and genuine in the midst of that is always a balance, always a bit of a struggle, but I've been maintaining for the most part. However, then I came upon the realization, which I've come to in the past, but it hasn't been so clear cut as a lesson that I'm actively being expected to learn, which is that it doesn't just apply to personal relationships in those types of ways. It also applies to professional relationships. And very much, you know, your boss or the company that you work for or the job in of itself and what it entails can very much mimic toxic codependency in a lot of different ways. Control, you know, toxic control patterns. And it's important to recognize your tendency towards certain things and to recognize how those things can be, you know, reflecting in those types of relationships, and then how to maintain yourself through those types of things. Especially just because ultimately we don't want to be giving the enemy control, ever. I don't know exactly who your adversaries are, but I know that we share them energetically. And the most important thing is not giving those people, places, things, ideas, our power. Not that, because that's what they need in order not to be our adversary or opponent, but to have any sort of control over us, to be able to defeat us in any sort of way that does require us submitting to them or giving over our power to them in different ways. That's not that you need to be an asshole, that you need to be stubborn, that you need to have like such strong boundaries, strong, solid, but not so harsh, you know, of boundaries. It just means, yeah, that you know, knowing yourself is ultimately going to be the key to all things. I'll just keep repeating that consistently. So yeah, that's about where I'm at in the energy right now. That's what's coming through. Let's see what's in the cards. My landlord's family just got here from Chile. They're going to be staying for about a week. So I'm going to likely be remaining fairly busy with everything over the course of this holiday season, but it's really nice. They're super friendly. I was just chatting with them. I don't really know. Okay, the cards that we have, these two came face up, Earth and Milky Way. And then we have these two that came face down. So the way that I put them is the two face up in the middle and then the two face down on either side. And what I'm getting from that reading immediately is that we're talking about balancing the spiritual with the physical, the emotional with the intellectual with the tangible. It's about really seeing things from every perspective, being able to remain grounded while also being able to attain new heights, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, or otherwise. Everything falling into a balance, and falling into a balance within its own realm, and then within a greater realm, as everything is interconnected. Within its own realm in the sense that, you know, flowers grow out of the dirt. A pineapple is growing, there's trees, they're bushes, they grow out of the dirt, they grow straight out in the ground. I don't know. I was trying to think about that because somebody was trying to plant a pineapple the other day, and I was like, how do they even grow? Is that how that works? I don't even understand. I don't remember how pineapples grow. I think they just grow out of the ground. But my initial thought is that there's a tree, like a pineapple tree, that I guess I've never actually seen them growing. Either way, there is a specific realm in which things develop. There's a specific realm in which things exist and coexist. Here we have, you know, a butterfly with the flowers. There's the stars with the air. There's the earth. You know, all of these different elements are all working together in a very specific way at any given time in order to cater to the abundance of the world, just as much as all of these things are adding together in the same sort of way in a very specific balance in order to cater to the abundance of the universe. And the earth lies within the universe. The Milky Way lies within the universe. These things are all separate on their own, but also part of a greater picture. And that's kind of the image as well. When you see a flower growing out of the ground, particularly a blade of grass that you see in the yard is not its own thing. It's a fraction of a larger whole, not the whole lawn. The lawn is actually made out of a whole bunch of different grass bulbs. There's multiple plants all over that are growing out of the ground that way. And then it breaks down into smaller and smaller aspects. Yet, you rarely, unless there's very sparse grass, but like generally speaking, you're rarely going to see just one blade of grass. And that's it, and that's the whole plant, and that's all you get to see of it. Like, no, generally it's part of a grander structure, and that in of itself is part of a grander structure. When I was doing landscaping, we would lay sod, right? Sod? Or is sod just the dirt? I think sod is the dirt with the grass attached. Pretty sure. See, I don't even remember. But there's also there's layers to it as far as nutrients are concerned, and as far as like adding on top of it is concerned. And all of those things you would lay, first you would dig, then you would, make sure the dirt is good, and then you would put down this fertilizer, and then you put down the sod, and then you'd make sure that the grass seed is on top of it, and then once that's all set, then you can start planting the flowers in it, sort of deal. If you were starting from totally fresh. And the flowers aren't just even blooming by themselves. It requires water, it requires air, it requires sun, it requires pollination consistently throughout time. And so when you see just one of those things, you can it's giving way to something grander. There's certain things to look for, especially when you're feeling hopeless, or when you're feeling lost, or when you're feeling like, man, it seems like nothing good is ever coming to me or is ever working out for me. Focusing on those little positives, focusing on those very small aspects is actually not just, okay, so this is what I have to focus on because then at least I know that there's something positive and that'll keep me going. Those are actually supposed to be giving way to the sense of a greater positivity. You wouldn't just see one of those things isolated. That isn't how those things work. Even if it appears to be that way, even if it feels to be that way, the more that you're able to give it energy and understand it, the more that you see that those things are actually part of a much greater whole, and that those things are actually giving way to something much grander. And so in the same way, like, you're not just going to see, if you're traveling through the entire universe and you happen upon this planet, and on this planet you find water and dirt, those are the aspects and essence of life. Those are the things that we look for when we're traveling through the universe to try to find life on other planets. Those things give way to a sense of something greater beyond just those things. Those are stating that life exists here. However, that's our definition of life based on what is measurable and experienceable. Even dead planets, even dead stars, all matter in the universe is part of life. It's part of the grander experience. All of these things serve their own purposes and have their own space, and all fall into a greater balance in that way. Okay, so now let me flip these. We have humidity in the reverse, and we have the sun in the reverse. Humidity in the reverse on the side of the Milky Way, the sun in reverse on the side of the Earth. This card, humidity in the upright, is very abundant. It's self-care. It's having all of these little things adding up to a sort of comfort, a sort of balance. In the reverse, it's giving me this idea of turmoil, turbulence, past issues, PTSD, maybe mental illness, maybe emotional disturbances, maybe a lack of finances, maybe uncertainty just about what the next movement is, sort of anxiety, a dryness, a sharpness, a feeling of being in need, that concern and that cynicism that everything's about to hit the fan and that everything's going to shit, when like it's really in this position next to the Milky Way in the upright too, like it's really important to not give power to those things. That is the adversary, that is the enemy. Those are the very things that we don't want in this world. So it's important to not give credence to those things. If they are facing you, if you are staring at a monster and it is literally right there in your face, then handle it as you must. But even just the sound, like if you're hiding from something, or let's say you're in the next room and you hear something in the next room, like until it's right before you, overreacting about it, getting all caught up in your anxiety about it, letting it affect you to the point of becoming depressed, that isn't going to be ultimately helpful. The anxiety is there, and that's okay. That it's okay to you don't have to suppress it. You don't have to act like it's not there. That's just going to build some sort of weird aggression in you, or some sort of weird apathy that's not helpful. Neither are helpful. It's fine to acknowledge the anxiety, but don't support it. Don't give it any more power. It can exist as it exists, but it's like, if you want to exist, you got to support yourself, because I'm not giving you anything. I'm not going to sit here and validate you. I mean, even if you have somebody looking you straight in the eyes, intending the absolute worst, it's best not to be given to fear. It's best not to be to giving into being given to giving them power. It's best to just hold your own and to remain grounded. Like if you're in the desert as compared to humidity, because it's in the reverse. If you're in the desert and you're without any sort of moisture and you're absolutely dehydrated, allowing yourself to hyperventilate isn't going to help. Letting yourself get all hot, get all worried, feeling like running around anxiously trying to look for water even though there isn't any around, those things aren't going to help. That's going to make everything worse. You don't want to beat a dead horse, but even more, you don't want to beat yourself down while you're already carrying so much, trying to move uphill. It isn't helpful if your goal is to make it all the way uphill. So it's about taking that step back and trying to see things from as big of a picture as you possibly can. I mean, the Milky Way isn't the entire universe, but when you step outside and when the telescopes have sent us pictures of the Milky Way, and you see how giant the Milky Way is and how tiny and minuscule our problems on Earth are in comparison to this perspective, I mean, it really puts things in perspective. You really realize that, like, okay, this isn't the biggest, greatest thing ever. It is for me in my own personal life, but I can step back and remove myself from that in order to really be able to properly prioritize what is right for me, what is best for me, and what isn't ultimately going to be serving me. Okay, and then the sun in the reverse is speaking on the same sort of thing, but in regards to the earth. So the sun is the thing that gives the earth life. Like this is what the whole world revolves around, right? In the reverse, it's this sense that of feeling overwhelmed, of feeling overburdened, of feeling burnt out, of feeling too small in comparison, feeling insignificant somehow, feeling like, oh, there's all these other planets floating around the sun. It wouldn't even matter if Earth was here or not. Universe goes on. We could all just move to Mars. Who even cares about Earth? Like, not a helpful mindset by any stretch of the imagination. It is a cynicism. It's a deep cynicism. And it's a cynicism that has effectually become even larger than one's perspective of themselves or one's identification of their own value. It's fine to have enough cynicism towards things that you can look and say, you know what, this doesn't really matter. This is a bad situation. Let me step outside of it so that I'm not taking it too personal. But you can get too caught up in that as well, to suddenly you're making yourself small. You're limiting yourself. You're not appreciating all of the growth that there has been. You're not appreciating the importance of other things coming externally in order to add to that growth. You're not appreciating every aspect of the elements of any given situation that are needed in order to bring a fullness into that situation. You become very hyper-fixated on this heliocentric concept, on this idea that, man, if I can't be positive, if I don't have that one thing that's making me happy, if I don't have that main thing, then none of this matters, which isn't true. It isn't true. It's becoming almost too hyper-fixated on the singular, on earthly matters, on things that are essentially out of your control but feel so close to home and so personal that it starts to eat away at your ego, or at your perception of yourself. Yeah, your ego. Your ego isn't something innately negative. It's just often the thing that becomes so toxic, given our experiences. It's what we tend, it's part of it's hinging on the subconscious, and it's part of, what we're always putting our compliments and our belittlements into. Anything that makes us feel shitty, we put that right into our ego. Well, that's because I'm a bad person. That's because I suck. That's because I'm not good enough. Anytime we get a compliment or that we feel success, we also put that into the ego. Like, oh, I'm so great because of this thing. You're right. Like, this is me or whatever. And that's not, the ego is not us. And we tend to identify by it too much, and then everything becomes this cynical way of being. This is truly the core person. You are as much spiritual as you are physical. You have a physical frame. You have this tangible experience that you are experiencing, this tangible existence that you are experiencing. But you are the one that is experiencing it. As this tangibility. You are outside of that. You are beyond that. You are greater than that. You are not just in it, you are through it. You are the consciousness and that spark of creation that exists in all things, encapsulated in this thing. There's a perfect balance. This always speaks in a balance, and there's a perfect balance in this. But our egos lying on the outside tend to take those things and then take them personal and make them some type of way, which is fair considering the fact that if this were in the upright, well, now we're self-caring, now we're feeling, abundant, we feel like we're thriving, and those things aren't invalid. It's just not to identify ourselves by those things, because that isn't what determines our value. Just because I'm succeeding in life doesn't mean that I'm a more valuable person than when I wasn't succeeding in life. I'm valuable regardless. That isn't what the actual inherent value of a thing is. In the same sort of way, this is when everything's positive, when I'm feeling really good, when I'm happy, when I'm healthy, when I'm in love, that's when life is worth living. But when things are going bad, and when my luck is on the low, and when I can't find somebody to love properly or to love me properly, then none of this is worth it. That's not true. That's not true at all. And it's very important to understand these things in balance, because these serve a purpose. These aren't just something to throw away. These aren't just something to ignore. These aren't just something I'm going to end up laying other cards on top, but it's important that we understand that even in the reverse, these things are incredibly important. They're still part of us. They're still just as important. And in fact, more often than not, my capacity to be in any of my shadows is what speaks more truth of me than my capacity to be in the light. Because the light isn't me. I am the light. I am the light. By embracing the light and letting it come through me. But the light exists in all things. My shadow is actually more me than the light itself. The sun shines, my shadow is cast. I can receive that light, but the shadow that's cast is the reflection of me. It's important to be able to embrace those things. You don't like what you see in the mirror, it's up to you to change it. You are the one with the power to. Whether that means moving in a different direction so that the light is being cast a different way, or if it means actually changing the things inside of you so that you can see yourself as you really want to. I mean, it's always a balance between those things as well. Sometimes the reason your shadow looks a certain way is just because the light is hitting you a certain way. And maybe that isn't your best lighting. That's okay, you know, but it is important to be able to balance out these things. It's important to balance out these things. As I'm saying that, there's the branch, which came out. It's in the reverse. But it's, you know, that idea that all things are connected, and that it's not, you know, in the reverse, it's like it's not just the moving out of the branches from the trunk, it's actually the bringing into the trunk, that's where all the nutrients are being received from and supplied. So, you know, there's always, and that's the thing too, yeah, giving and receiving are both the same thing. It's just a matter of perspective, you know. There's always the same energy transference going on, and when you can really step far enough back to recognize that, and also be willing to see yourself truly enough that you're willing to actually be in it properly, you'll realize that you're in control of all of those things and how you're choosing to receive, how you're choosing to give, and these things won't seem, you'll feel far less victimized. You'll likely never feel victimized, and when you find yourself feeling victimized, you'll suddenly realize that you're in a hurt ego, which isn't healthy. And, you know, the ego often is quite sensitive and feels like it gets hurt, but the ego is also extremely easy to heal, far more than the physical body. So it's important not to identify ourselves by those things as much as it's important to be willing to work with those things, you know. Don't just deny them either. So we have water and we have grill in the reverse. Water, the pouring out of emotions. Grill is being on guard. But they are both in the reverse, which is so funny because then they're opposing each other. So we have water next to humidity. So I brought these cards out as a way to try to, you know, we have our ego here, and it's important that they're in the negative. I pulled these cards as a means to kind of counter that, because we're moving in, this is us, this is our ego, and then this is our experience and how it counters into those things. It is funny though, because they came out so opposing, and because they're both still in the reverse, but it's actually quite positive. So the pouring out of one's emotions when it comes to being in this concept that of seeing the greater picture, and moving away from feeling so over-invalidated, or having an overinflated ego that, you know, now you're super sensitive and nothing's ever good enough for you. The pouring out of those emotions in the reverse is hold back on those things. When you're feeling so big that you can't take anymore, hold back on expression, on an emotional level at least. I don't know if you ever really should be holding back on creative expression. I think creative expression is a work of God and quite important. It's a personal opinion. But when it comes to an emotional expression, there are plenty of times that is not going to serve you the best. And it's in those times that you're feeling too big and overwhelmed within the reality and within yourself that it's important to hold back those emotions until they settle down, until they calm, until they're not just a flood or a waterfall of things you can't control coming out of you. Find yourself bringing yourself back into a sense of balance. In the same way, when you start feeling too small and like you're never getting enough and like you're feeling hopeless and you're feeling that lack mentality, you know, we have the victim mentality, and the self-preservation, and now we have the lack mentality, and the cynicism. It's important to not guard yourself. So grill is the guard in front of a car, or it's even more than like grilling on something, like cooking. It's referring to like the grill, the lattice work on a car, essentially, where it's a barricade between one thing and another, while still letting certain things flow. It's a block. It's a sort of blockage, right? With an intended purpose, but in the reverse, it's don't feel the need to constantly be on the defense. Don't feel the need to be on the defense. These are some of the hardest things to grasp truly, even once you become aware of what your ego is doing. It's hard enough just to grasp what your ego is doing and why it feels the way that it feels and how it's making you feel certain ways and how you're validating yourself by those things. But once you do, it's even harder to embrace the actual tools necessary for working those things out properly. And it's kind of like, because once something already gets in control, it's like trying to jump into a car when it's spinning out of control and slow it down and steer it straight. Or like if there's a jackhammer that's jackhammering, but there's nobody attached to it, like trying to jump in there and grab it and shut it off and make it do its thing. Like when something's already in this chaotic state of motion, it makes it that much harder to be able to jump onto it, jump into it, and really harness a control over it. However, most of the issue when it comes to being able to do that isn't the actual physical task of it as much as it is the fear and intimidation attached to that necessary action. So as hard as it may be when you're feeling overinflated and when you're feeling like you just can't take anymore, not letting those emotions flow, finding yourself in a calm, holding yourself back, keeping yourself down, finding a way to ground yourself, that can often be the hardest thing. It is, but that's the reason it's the hardest thing, is because that's what's lacking in that period of time. That's why you feel so out of control in that way, is because you're lacking this thing. So claiming this, giving power to your grounding instead of power to the chaos, is what is going to bring a sense of balance. In the same sort of way, when you're feeling limited, when you're feeling lack, when you're feeling too small, not holding back is what's going to validate. And the tendency that comes with this ego interpretation is, I'm not good enough, so then I don't deserve to receive love. Well, I didn't work hard enough for that, so I don't deserve a reward for it. Well, I'm poor, so I can't afford that nice thing. I'm mad, so I can't be happy. We tend to, when we're in this ego state, we tend to create this blockage. And it's important to remove that blockage, to turn it in the reverse, because that is the thing that is causing the chaos. The balance is going to come from being able to acknowledge these things and then being able to assert these tools with them. And part of that is that in the reverse, these things are innately negative. However, they serve a grander purpose when it comes to our core person. It's important to not just deflect those things and suppress those things and act like we're so much better than those things. It's important to acknowledge them and to embrace them for what they are. However, to embrace them for what they are, but it's not just letting them stay there. The point of those things is to lead us to the tools that it takes in order to really bring everything into balance. And so when we're looking from the outside to the inside as well, we have freeing ourselves from negative mindsets, from hurtful defenses that end up hurting us. Removing those things, releasing those things, turning those things around so that we can come down to a groundedness, so that we can reconnect with our community, so that we can reconnect with the external resources at hand, so that we can really see right where we are, and that we can be in a positive mindset about it and be grateful for it. as much as it is, you know, that's like letting the emotions flow, not holding up. Not, the grill is like being free to express yourself as need be, to receive things as need be, to be completely open. In the in the perceived opposition on the opposite side, but rather these are all working together, is to control one's emotional state, to control the expressions that we tend to, or the way that we tend to be led by our emotions and thoughts and feelings those ways, or rather our experience, and to let that discipline guide us further out. Now we're not just grounded. We're it takes, not just anybody can be an astronaut. You have to be like extremely physically fit. You have to be extremely mentally fit. You have to be capable of all these different types of things. And it takes a lot of training and a lot of testing. And only so many people are capable of even being an astronaut, right? Of even being able to really go to this point. However, well, in the tangible, in the third dimension. But right now we're talking, all of this is essentially fifth dimensional. This is the fourth dimension, transitioning back and forth. This is the third dimension, but it's transitioning back and forth. Every individual is capable of these things. Every individual is innately both of these. These work hand in hand together. This is the state of who we are as people. Every individual has the capacity for those things, but every individual has to, it takes skill as a gardener to be able to ensure a abundant harvest, and it takes skill as an explorer in order to fulfill spatial explorations, universal explorations. So we are capable of all things that way. The things that tend to limit us is our perspectives. These are perspectives that are attached to a toxicity the ego has validated itself by and is trying to value itself from. And the tools in order to ensure that those things are properly accounted for, properly adjusted, properly accepted, and properly then externally attributed to us is, these skills. These are definitely skills. These are definitely skills. And really they're the same skill. One in the other, one's right hand, one's left hand, essentially. That's funny because it actually is that way too. I didn't realize, but yeah, it actually is that way. But yeah, they're essentially the same thing, but these are skills. These take time, these take patience, these take knowing ourselves. Like I said, knowing ourselves is always going to be the utmost quality. I can't, even with the Tao, I was reading the Tao and I would like to go through it more and explain the excerpts as I'm reading them. But a huge concept in there that keeps coming up is essentially that you cannot know, that it cannot be taught to you. It can only be received. There's a quote that I have from a song that I wrote that says, truth travels from the mouth of babes, for wisdom can't be taught, only gained. The truth is spoken best in ignorance, but maybe we just call different things love sometimes. And the idea is that as much as I can teach, and I care to, and I will be able to explain those things. It's so funny because the Tao is constantly referencing how those that have so much to say don't actually know what the fuck they're talking about, that these concepts can't actually be explained, that words are so futile, yet it is exactly that, right? That's part of the irony of life, for sure. But the point of that is exactly the point of the Tao. The point of the Tao isn't to hold you by the nose and lead you to whatever pasture it decides you're to be in at any given time. It's not to force the horse to drink. It's just to lead them to the water. It's to create this space where that irony exists, that seeming opposition exists. The devil only exists so that you can come to your godhood. That's it. There's no actual power that the devil has. All of that's been put to death through your own sacrifice of your ego with yourself in order to incorporate those things properly so that you can engage with your most divine aspects, and so that you can reach an alignment with your highest power, and so that you can take life by the horns and go with it which way you would choose to, which way is best for you, knowing yourself so that you know what's best for you, so that you can make those choices. It all revolves around you. Nobody else can force you to understand these things, to care for these things, to incorporate these things into your life. That has to be a personal choice. It has to be a personal choice. Faith is a personal experience, and a personal skill. And as much as we all are this, we all relate to this, each and every one of us does it in our own personal way. And, you know, in the same sort of way, like, we're all on this, in this one stream of consciousness, but we're all different ideas within it. You know, we all revolve around the same sun, but we're all different life forms, you know, and so being able to know ourselves truly, and then being able to know ourselves, to engage with ourselves enough that we can access these skills and then build on these skills, is what is going to allow us to not only be able to be balanced from the inside out, but to also be balanced from the outside in. And I can say from experience, there's been plenty of times that I have been balanced from the inside out, which has saved me in so many different experiences, and kept me throughout all of the craziness that I've experienced in my life. But to be able to be balanced from the outside in as well, it should come after the fact. And at that point, it looks like almost the pure manifestation of, you know, I know now to not put myself into certain chaotic positions because they're not beneficial to me. I know now not to engage with that certain emotion or type of person. I know now not to consume that certain, you know, food, drink, subject matter, because those things aren't truly serving me. And then to be able to craft the life that is most sufficient for us and most in balance with what we are, who we are, where we are meant to be. And it's in those spaces that we find true, genuine peace, that we find true, genuine contentment, that we find true, genuine strength, that we find true, genuine happiness, and that we find true and genuine connection with all things. And in true, genuine connection with all things, we never are feeling like we're going without. Yes, we can still tend towards these emotions, but we never feel like we're going without. We never feel like we have too much to deal with. And both of these also, everything about everything is both. It's a vice versa type of deal. That's the importance of the yin and the yang. Everything encapsulates both concepts within themselves, and it is a matter of perception. And the mark of a powerful sage is to be able to, you know, a powerful person, a person that's truly awakened unto themselves, is to be able to see both sides, and then to see them in their inverses, and then to see how ultimately they all just balance out. There's all just little pieces of everything into it, and it's all just actually part of one grander whole. Yes, I have 6 cards out here on the table, but they're actually part of just one singular read with one true core message. And even in that, there's its own duality of what I intend through this and through my communications of this, and what you are willing to receive of it. You know, so that it's kind of all of these things always in balance. But that's the power. And it's in embracing these things that you find your power more and more and more and more to overcome all things, to embrace all things. You know, to see love and light in all things. And yeah, to truly find yourself there in all things. And personally, yeah, I think that the greatest gift of life is to be able to find ourselves within it. So hopefully this is a blessing. I hope that the rest of your day, whatever it is that you're doing with yourself for the holidays, if you happen to watch this around the time I post it, that is blessed for you. And yeah, I will see you soon.